All right, so again, let's go over this test, and I'm going to at least try to tell you if I took off, why I took off. Okay? First of all, let's see. One or two of you, there were supposed to be two validators for the program. There was a required validator and there was a range validator. Some people put in one and didn't put in the other. I didn't care that much over which order you put them in, so if you put the required one first, then the range one, that was okay. All right, typically you'd put the required one first, but again, that wasn't really all that important. All right, the text box for the interest rate, some of you put it in as 0.01, which was okay. All right, for 1%, that might be a little confusing to somebody who's actually going online to look at the program. They may or may not understand it. That's why I made mine 1, 2, 3 up till 10, but again, that's not that big of a thing. As far as the drop down, just so you know, and again, you think I'm being picky here, but I'm just trying to be honest with you. There was no reason to put two if statements in there. Many of you did that. There was no reason to do that. You could put both for loops inside of the same if statement. Not only could you, I would say that would probably be recommended. All right, and the reason that I'd say that would be recommended is it's going to run faster. All right. At least one of you right here, remember when you do this, there's three parts to this. There's the initialization, but since I initialized up here, I don't have to do it again. There's the test, and there's the change. If you leave that last one off, you're going to be in an infinite loop, correct? Okay. If you leave that second one off, it's not going to make any sense because there's no test. All right. And I didn't even check on this. I thought about it later, but I think everybody set the unobtrusive validator mode. So I was very, very happy. People, by and large, bootstrapped very well. Okay. Now, maybe it's because you've had enough practice doing it. I don't really know, but most of the pages were set up and they looked really nice. I know, Amin, you said on yours, I don't know. I looked at it too, and I don't know why that one field. All I could suggest would be, if you haven't done so, is literally remove it and type it back in again. And if you did that, then I'm not sure what the problem is. Somehow I think it's Evan's fault because he's sitting next to you, but I don't know. All right, so just kidding. All right, so like I said, I don't think anyone lost any points there. If you did, you'd have to look yourselves. I'm not sure if you did. Now, one thing for this last one. Okay, I should mention this because some of you got bid on this. If you've got a range validator, there's three big components you have to put in. A minimum value, a maximum value, and a type. If you don't change the type, it defaults to string. It would not work correctly if you did that. I'd say probably half of you in this room did that. You left it off. All right? Now, I don't care if you say this isn't working, I'll be glad to look at it. How do I know that? Because that's what Brady did. His didn't work, but he asked me. All right? So, all right. On the formula. Some of you, I don't know if you were confused or what, but that the formula that you see up there, the P equals and all the other stuff, first of all, this is really one line. Could you have broken it up into two lines? Yes, but then you would have had to combine them. All right? So this, as it says, was the rate per period. So if it was 3%, that was going to be 0.03 divided by 100, or 3 divided by 100, or 0.03, one or the other, divided by 12. Because that 3% is an annual rate. It's not a monthly rate. All right? So 3 divided by 12 would be 0.0025 or whatever it is. That's the monthly rate. All right? Because if you did it the other way, and one or two of you did, then instead of having the value that I gave you that was 800 something, you had 8,000 something. All right? So that was what was wrong with that. Okay? The other thing too is if you look at this is not subtract n from it. This is raised to the n. And a couple people did math where you did subtraction there. No. But I do want you to understand that if you put in that formula, this is what I showed you yesterday on the board, or in the test. But so for instance, if this is your principal, and this is your annual interest rate, and your years are 30, all right, and you put all that stuff in and you put the formula in correctly, then your monthly payment should have been, I believe it was like $843.21. It was something like that, okay? If you're doing that for 30 years and you take 843.21 and you multiply that by 30, hopefully I can do this without screwing it up, 6, 9, 12, 1, 25, if I did it right. It's pretty darn, oh, it's 36. That was stupid. All right, 6 times 1 is 6, 12, 1, 19, 1, 25, 2, 50, 0. Should have kept that. 3 times 1 is 3, 6, 9, 12, 1, 25. All right, again, I may have screwed up the math. I don't know. But it came out to be somewhere around this. Again, I might be off by a little bit, but you get the idea. So it was somewhere around this amount, okay? $303,555.60. It was something like that, okay? Does that make sense to everyone? This is how much you're paying. So in other words, if let's say I was buying a $250,000 house in my dreams, but let's say that I was doing that, and I had $50,000 I put down, then I would be getting a loan for $200,000, correct? And if I said I wanted a 30-year mortgage, and they told me that the best rate they could give me was 3%, this would be my annual payment.
Per year?
No, this is per month. And multiplying it by 360 months would give me this. I don't know about you, but to me always, that's just a little bit disheartening in that, wow, that means that $103,555.60 I'm paying the bank in interest. Yeah, that's how they stay around. And it's even worse when you're like me, when in May, my house in Rockton is paid off, so I can come and move down here, so I can get another one and go through it all over again. All right? But what I want you to understand is, so this is the total cost. And if I subtract from that the $200,000, which is my principal, then I get 103,555.60. This is the interest paid. Now, does all that make sense to everybody? Take a look at it. Because that's what you were supposed to be doing, okay? I figured that the hard part of this, figuring all this stuff out in all seriousness, would have been that. That's why I basically gave you an example where I put it in there for you. I thought that would make it easy for you. Maybe I was wrong, but I thought that it would. All right?
What's the code look like for it?
I'm going to show you that in just a second. What's that? Well, if you do this,
The first one's the number.
if you do this, math.pow, and you say 3, 2, that's the same thing as saying 3 squared. That's what it is. 3 times 3.
So I should have put.
I'm going to show you, okay? But like I said, that's why I plugged in the numbers here, you know.
This is correct.
So there's a bunch of ways this could be done. Some of you decided to break that up into 2 steps, but then you didn't combine the stuff together. Well, then you kind of had 2 numbers that really neither one of them by themselves meant anything. All right? So like I said, I guess it was at 843.21. So let's see, how close was I? Well, whatever. I guess I added or I did something wrong. All right, so the other thing too, just so you're aware of this, is if you do your calculations with decimals versus doubles, you're probably going to get different values. They're going to be off by a few cents. So which way does the bank use? The bank uses the way that makes them the most money. That's not a joke. It may not sound like it's that big a thing to you, but when you think about with major banks that have branches all over the country, if they can even make a few extra dollars by doing something with the hundreds of thousands of loans and stuff that they do, that adds up. That adds up into millions. All right, so let me get rid of that. So I know what you asked me, and I'm going to show it to you. I don't know what that did. That's not what I want. So the first thing, I just want to run through this one more time with you, just in case you had any problems with it whatsoever. Like I said, I wanted a title on there, people put a title. I wanted the meta tag with viewport, people put that in. I wanted it, your bootstrap min CSS and then your style one, people did that. I wanted the jQuery, then the bootstrap min JS, people did that. I wanted you to put a main in there and then put a jumbotron, people did that. So everything was cool. All right, I had no problems with what everybody was doing. Everybody bootstrapped it fairly well. All right, one thing that you have to realize, and hopefully you do, when you are doing this stuff, and you've built your interface like this, save it and run it right away, even though it doesn't work. That way, at least you can tell whether or not your interface works. Does that make sense? Because I think, I'm not sure, but I think that with at least a couple of you, what you did was you put code in and you didn't complete your code, so you had errors in your code. If you have errors in your code, it's never going to even show you your interface. All right? So like I said, in here, this is what I was mentioning to you. So you had to not only put in the maximum and the minimum, you had to put a type in there too. And I did not take off for it because it's not incorrect, but just so you know, and you know if you did this or not, but just so you know, technically a couple of you put int in there for type. Okay, that probably, you know, you're not going to probably walk in and ask, can I borrow $200,063.12? But could you? I would think you could. If I walk in and say I want to borrow $1 million, and I'm a good customer from a company, you know, that they, let's say that I've got that much money, but I want to borrow it for some business or whatever, and I come in and for whatever reason, I say, you know what, make it $999,997.56. They're going to do it. They may say, do you want to round that up to an even million? If I say no, they're not going to say, well, then I'm not giving you the loan. They're not going to do that. So technically, you probably should have made that a double. All right. I don't think there was anything else in here that by and large people had a problem with that I can think of. All right, so I'm just going to forget about that. All right, so in here, this is what I mentioned. In the same if statement, I did both for loops. That's just a cleaner way of doing it. All right? And at least one of you, and again, I'm not naming names and I'm not blaming you, but I'm just telling you. If you look on the screen for a second, please. At least one of you did this. You took it right out of the book. So you didn't have that, which is fine, except you did it like this. That's actually wrong. If you did that, it's wrong because that second loop is always going to run. That's not correct. All right? You really only wanted those two things to be filled up when you were doing it for the first time. All right? Okay. The is valid. You'll notice I did create another function called calculate monthly payment. I know, I think, Brady, you asked me, somebody did during the test, or do we have to write separate functions? Originally, I was going to have you do it, and I thought, you know what? I have no idea how fast people are going to get done in here. So I figured just have you put it in the click event. Now, there's nothing that stops me in the next test from saying, take everything that you've got directly into a click event, put it in its own routine. In fact, you can almost count on that's going to happen. Okay? I gave the second hands-on test this morning to the first year people. And I thought, this is pretty hard. It wasn't the exact one you guys took last year. I think it was harder. All right? And so I thought, well, this is going to keep busy at least for 3 hours. About an hour and 5 minutes in, one guy turned his in. He looked supremely confident when he turned it in, too. So, I don't know. That's why you never know how much time it's going to take. Now, notice, I don't have any global variables. Do you agree? Because one of the things that I said was in the clear event, make sure that you clear out both your text boxes, your drop downs, and your labels, and also any global variables that you have. All right, so either don't use global variables or clear them out right there. And I don't think we have to go over the clear event now because that was it. The other thing too is a couple of you put this, you put down in there selected index equal 1, I think, and selected index equal 10. That's not right. Everybody hear that? I want everybody to look at the board because at least one person who did it wrong is not looking at the board right now. All right? That should not have said selected index equal 1, selected index equal 10. Index is the array. So the 0th component is the first one, 1 is the second one. Technically, the way I did it was right. Because if you decide later you're going to change it, maybe now, maybe you're not going to offer your 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Maybe later you decide you want to offer the 5 years, 10 years, 15, you want to do it by 5s. Then if you forget to change that, it's going to always reset it to 10 instead of to 5. All right, so that's the way that it should have been done. All right, so let's look at this. So this is my calculate. So these are the variables. Principal, grabbed everything from the text box. Monthly payments, just a variable with nothing in it. Now notice the interest rate, that's the drop down dot selected value. That grabs the actual value that's in there, but a dot toString because I believe the way that it comes out that it expects it to be in that format. But then we converted it to a double right away. Okay? The other thing, and again, the person who did this is not looking on the board right now, but that should not be a double. Why? What? Yeah, because you wouldn't typically take out a loan for part of a year. And these are the kind of things that by the time we take our last test in here, anytime you do something like that, I'm going to take off for it.
But it's on a drop-down list.
I don't care.
Okay. Well,
It's on a drop-down list, but you're putting it into a variable.
right.
All right? And it's wrong. If nothing else, it's wasting resources because you need to put a little bit more memory, about double the memory aside for a double as opposed to an integer. All right. Then I said, here's my number of periods. That's just my years times 12. Here's my rate per period, which was the interest rate divided by 100 divided by 12. And there's my total interest. Do those variables that are right there, do those variables make sense to everyone? Any question on any of those variables? Let me erase this. Kind of away here. One more time. Do all those variables make sense to everyone? All right. And it was kind of an ugly line. Now, I over parenthesize. All right. I used to work with a guy, and, he actually called me, and I didn't like the term anyway. I found it derogatory, but he called me the parentheses fairy. All right, because he said, boy, you just like put in parentheses even places you don't need them. I don't care. I want there to be no doubt. So you know as well as I do, when you've got nested sets of parentheses, you do the innermost set and you work your way out. So that's what I'm doing. So this thing right here, I'm gonna go back to the test, but I'm gonna come right back to this, that, right there. That's in blue. Everybody see that? That's in blue. That is this, R times PV. That's what that is. Now, the rate per period, you either had to say your interest rate divided by 100 divided by 12, or you had to do it up here. That's why I did it and put it in another variable. All right? And the principal just stayed what it was. There's the principal up there. That's what you're borrowing. Then the other of it was kind of ugly. I don't know who came up with that formula. Somebody who's a lot smarter than I am, but somebody came up with that formula. Now, and some of you are taking it down, which is fine. The point is, when you do yours, you better make sure you adjust. So if you use different variable names than I did, You change your variable names, or it's not going to work. And again, look on the screen, please. This thing, if you didn't create a rate per period like I did, then you're going to have to say here in parentheses, interest rate divided by 100 divided by 12. I just want to make sure you know that. But my goal is for everybody in this room, after you go and make the changes to your program, and I'd suggest keep your original, make changes to a copy, all right? And then double check it. Use the numbers that I've given you already, the 200,000, the 3%, and the 30 years. If you get $843.21, boom, you did it correctly. So then what's the total loan payment? That's the monthly payment times the number of periods. That is this number that's right here, this thing. All right? What's the interest? That's what you paid, your total payment, minus your principal. So this line that's right here in blue, that line is what we got with this. That's this line, which was the multiplication of our monthly payment times the number of pays. This line right here, the total interest, bless you, that was the total payment minus the principal. So this, put it in P yellow, this one that's right here, that is the amount of interest that you're paying. All right? And telling you this, I'm not trying to be funny. I have no idea. Every place is different. It's not at all inconceivable that you could go for a programming job and be given a test like this. All right? I'm not saying it would or wouldn't happen, but you know, it's not inconceivable that they think you could be able to figure out all that stuff. All right? Okay, then that actually put that value in for the monthly payment, and this was setting my session variables. I realized after I did this, I should have put in comments, and I didn't. If it helps you, then you should put comments in your program. All right? The clear button, then we've already gone over. In the stats button, I was looking for something like this. If the monthly payment was null, you hadn't figured out a monthly payment yet. So you should have said you must calculate a monthly payment before you go on, otherwise you do your response.redirect. So again, when I come in here and click, I want to show you something that you may or may not have noticed. You know how that line I just put in there, that if statement that said that was supposed to, that message will never be hit, ever. Why? What I'm telling you is this message down here will never change, even with nothing in it. Why? Because that validator. And how do you get that validator to disappear? Well, remember, if you do this, okay, then it changes. I guess that was actually valid, wasn't it? Then we get that validator. So the only way that this is going to be correct is if we actually do put a valid value in there. So this technically is never going to change. The reason I wanted you to leave that in there, and the reason I wanted you to put that in there, is just in case somebody either disables that validator or removes the validator. So why do they ever do that? I don't know. All right. One thing you can always count on with people is at least sometimes they'll do something where no one will have any idea why they did it. All right. Any questions on anything on the default.aspx or the C# for the default page? Any questions? Yes.
Is it better to put your session variables in the calculate button or in the stats button?
The question was, is it better to put them in the calculate button or in the stats button? You could actually, to be honest with you, you could make a case for either one. All right. You know, and it's a good question. This morning, Colin was one of the people in there taking the test, and he asked a really good question. I don't remember what it was right now, but I remember thinking, that's a really good question. But he wanted to know about naming conventions. And I said, well, there really isn't one. And he goes, so what does that mean? And I said, that means that probably nobody gave it that much thought, so there isn't one. And in much the same way, like I said, when you can make a case either way, I would never take off, regardless of which one you did it on. All right? So let's look at the other one. So this was the stats. All right? Now, when we get down here, you're going to go, wait a minute, you took off on mine and you didn't do it. Yeah, but I wasn't taking the test. I was just the guy writing the test. All right? So, same kind of thing in here. Again, you could have copied that directly and just changed the title from input to stats from the other one. Okay? Everybody seemed to bootstrap it okay. Far as I remember, everything was done okay. If you say, Jeff, I did it, I bootstrapped it, etc., but I'm still not real comfortable with bootstrap, neither am I. All right? And I've done more than you have, but I still not. And I still have yet to find a really good bootstrap book. By and large, I think they're really bad. In fact, I even approached Murak about writing one, and he said, no, there's no market for it. That's because there isn't a good one. All right?
4's coming out too, so.
If 4 is out. But you're right. But it wouldn't be that hard to come up with, and to me, I even told him it'd be a project-based book. It'd be something like this. All right? And, write it using HTML and JavaScript and CSS and Bootstrap. But he was like, no, okay. I'm to the point now, even my wife says, wow, there's a lot of stuff that used to really, pardon my French, but really used to piss you off that you're just not even reacting to anymore. And I said, I consider the source, and I realized they're not really worth me getting mad over. All right? But if you ever saw me behind the wheel, you'd wonder why I can drop F-bombs to anybody who cuts me off. And she says, they don't hear you, but I do. Would you please shut the hell up? And it's bad because when she comes here, she doesn't know her way around. So I drive all the time. And I figure if I drive, I can say whatever I want to say. So, all right. So here's the other one. Again, the unintrusive validation. Now we're going in the other direction. Now we're grabbing those session variables on the right and we're copying them to local variables. All right. And then we're doing this. Now, no one asked this question, and I never even tried it, to be honest with you. I've never tried it. I even wondered, could you take this, for example, could I take this, and instead of casting those to doubles and ints, could I cast that to a string and put it right here directly? Could you do that? I don't know. I never tried it. You could try it and see if it worked. I don't know. I've never tried it. But some of you totally left this out. Some of you totally left this out of the page load. And if you did, I'm sorry, you got dinged for it. All right? So the unobtrusive validation, then if it's not equal to null, this was it. I believe there's nothing else. Yeah, there's nothing else in here. This is the whole page load right there. But you had to copy them over, and I tried to keep it to a minimum. So there were 6 things where you made 6 local variables, and 6 times then you copied them over. Did you notice, too, I did this? Not only is there a C for currency, there's a P for percentage. But if you look up on the screen, I had to make sure when I did that to divide by 100, because otherwise 3% came out 300%. Okay? Questions on anything that's in here?
It's probably kind of dumb, but how do you know what to name the session thing?
You can name really whatever you want. Yeah. It appears, looking at the author at least, that they use their session variables, they always capitalize them. Mainly because I think that stands out then as being a session variable. But even if I made that lowercase principal and copied it over to that principal, that would still work. Because one is being held in memory, is a session variable, but the other one's being held in memory someplace else, and it's just a local variable for the routine. All right.
And then, if session monthly payment, like that.
The what?
Like the part in red.
This?
What we're talking about.
These or this?
Top, yes.
This. What about it?
How do you know what to name it? I mean, I named mine payment, but
That's fine.
I didn't know if it
I mean, it was the monthly payment. So what I'm saying here is, if the monthly payment is not no. I only want to do that stuff because that means I've got everything else filled up. All right? So there was no reason to do it. So in other words, anytime it should be impossible. And one of the things that we're going to talk about later, all right, you may or may not have realized this, but if you look up on the screen here, when I come here, there's nothing from stopping the person from doing this. You can do that. Type that right into the address bar. Well, of course you can't. Yeah, you can. But,
Unless you're running it.
oh, wasn't I running it? I don't know. But the point is, you can do that. You shouldn't do that. All right? That's like going right to the, right to your cart page before you put anything in your cart. All right? Sometimes you can do that too, depending on how the thing is written. We'll talk about how to get around that in a later chapter. All right. So here was the send, and I did do it. You were supposed to send it, and we went through the example in class, correct? Didn't we go through this in class?
The send part?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't remember ever doing the if is valid. We just have the string name email.
Oh,
The send.
it might have even worked without the if is valid. But the point is, this is clearing out all the session variables before we go back. This is grabbing whatever we put in that first text box and sending it to name. This is grabbing what was ever in the second text box and giving it to email. And these things in here, those are placeholders. So if I put in Jeff Scott and jpscott@rankin.edu, it should say quotation sent to Jeff Scott at jpscott@rankin.edu. Does that make sense? And I believe, Evan, you may have been the only one who actually did it and had it working.
Completely forgot about it.
Well, and one of the reasons for your next test, I want you to start with this, is, let's face it, even the prep work you do with this, that might take an hour or more of your time. Okay? What you're going to see when we go through chapter 6 today, even if you're typing, that's fine, but please listen. What you're going to see in chapter 6 today is we're going to talk about the other controls. Some of them we talked about already, text boxes, labels, etc. But we're going to talk about other controls, check boxes, radio buttons, etc. And guess what? I'm going to have you incorporate those into the next iteration of this. Did everybody hear that? I might ask, for example, are you a veteran? And if you're a veteran, I might give you an extra 5% or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be something along those lines. Does that make sense? And I think that was it. Now, does anybody have any questions or anything else you want me to show again or whatever on here?
So for my stats page, like whenever I ran my test, it never showed everything. It never transferred like the receipt. Was that because, or the receipt, I guess it's being called, but was it because my calculate was wrong? Like I got all the points.
That's part of it, yeah.
Okay.
So when I graded this, just so you know, and I'll take your question in a second, Ethan, but when I graded this, just to kind of give you a window into my world or whatever you'd want to call it, on this, virtually everybody did it correct. I think everybody got 15 out of 15 on that, as far as I remember. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Unless you, that's the second one. This one, if you lost points, you only made one validator, or you didn't put the type in there. I think that's pretty much what everybody got wrong on those. This one, to my knowledge, just about everybody got all 15, if not everybody. All right? This, if you screwed up any part of the formula, you lost points. Now, to be honest with you, and believe me, I'm not saying this so you go, I'm glad we have you and not him. If this was Evan at St. Louis, you would have gotten a 0 if your formula didn't work out of 15. He believes in all or nothing. And he's told me, it's like, okay, you work for a bank. If that doesn't work or you get it wrong output, you're screwed. Especially if you're giving the user, if you give them something where, let's say that I goof that up and instead of being $843.21 a month, let's just say I goofed it up and somehow it was half that. If I sign a contract with somebody, a bank you can't come back with them later and go, we made a mistake here and you're actually only paying half of what you're supposed to pay. They can try to come back and get that money, but it was their error. I don't know if I ever told you about this. I found this hilarious because I'm a weirdo. But my younger brother, Mark, he had this really old beat-up truck, and he took it in for an oil change. And when he brought it in, the guy next to him brought in a thing for a brand new engine. They put the engine into my brother's car, in my brother's truck. And he came in over to pick up his truck, and they said, it's going to be a few more hours. And he said, why? And they said, we accidentally put an engine in here. And he goes, well, now it's my engine. And he got in the car and left, and there wasn't a frickin' thing they could do about it. They promised that it would be to him at 12 o'clock, and he had to go to work. So guess what? He got a brand new engine because they screwed up. And he told me, he said, I let the oil go a little after that because it wasn't that big a thing. It was like about, I don't know what he told me, $4,000 or $5,000. Right? But it wasn't his error. Okay? Yes.
I don't know why, but for some reason my calculation multiplied by 10 on everything, and Evan figured that out, and we have no explanation for it.
Well, otherwise, then send me an email and I'll look at it again, see if I can figure out what it is. Okay? I couldn't figure out Amin's either. Amin had his interface looked great, except I think it was the interest rate field was like pushed way over to the right, and I didn't see where he had any bootstrap in there to make that happen.
Well, it's exactly like his.
Yeah.
As far, the way that
Yeah.
it's set up, we don't know.
Okay, I'll be glad to, just like I said, send me an email. I'll take a look at it. All right. Any other questions on this test? I'm not here Friday. All right. I would suggest when you come in here Friday that you take some time and try to fix yours so that it works. I am going to expect that when you take your next test, you are at this point where everything in here works. So you might say, why don't you just give us a hard copy? First of all, I'm sick of giving hard copies. All right. And second of all, you learn by doing it. I'm showing it to you. All right. And by and large, most of you, your errors were fairly minor, or you left something out. If you left something out, you got to put it in.